Who do people say that I am? Who do you say that Jesus is? Who do you say that Jesus was? In Mark, we first see Jesus when he was baptized by John, the very same John people later say that he might be. In Mark, Jesus was ushered into his ministry at his baptism. Jesus sees at his baptism a vision of the heavens opening up and a voice telling him that he is God's Son. Yes, in Mark's Gospel, in the very first line, we read that Jesus, the Anointed One, the Christ, was the Son of God. But in Jesus' day, and in Mark's day, after him, the Roman Emperor was also known as the Son of God. The term, the Son of God, was a title. So who do people say that I am? Jesus asked his disciples. And their reply from the common stories, a reincarnation of that very same John who baptized him. They reply that he is Elijah, or one of the prophets. Jesus then asks his disciples, well, that's who the people say I am, but who do you think I am? Peter says that he is the Messiah, although they don't seem to understand what that title or that name will mean. For in the next few verses, Jesus tells them what the Messiah, being the Messiah, will mean, and they don't want to hear it. Say it's not so, Peter rebukes Jesus. Jesus responds angrily in return. Who do you say that Jesus was then? Who was Jesus in the first century Palestine? Is he the Jesus who is in Mark's Gospel was changed at his baptism? Is it the same Jesus as in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke? Jesus appears quite differently in the Gospel of John, to be sure. The Jesus of John has a full consciousness of his divinity. But in Mark's Gospel, we're not given those assurances. Was Jesus the founder of a church, as he was in Matthew? Or a healer, like he was in Luke? Who do you say Jesus was? Who do you say Jesus is here today? And this is the question that every modern follower of Jesus must ask themselves again and again. Who is Jesus? Because in Mark's Gospel, Jesus tells us that to be his followers, we must give up our self-centeredness. Give up our focus on me, me, me. We must take up our cross and follow him. And what is that cross? It's not some sacrifice of pain or wood or death, but it's the cross to love each other. Love even the persons who would hurt or persecute us. Jesus told the people, he told his disciples quite openly what he was going to face. And throughout, he was going to love his enemies, his persecutors. That was the cross of Christ. That he was going to love nonetheless. And that's the hardest thing to do when faced with evil and suffering. Vengeance and anger are easy emotions to feel in the face of what the enemy has in store for us. Vengeance and anger come from the self. They come from wanting to get even for ourselves or even for those who are important to us. Because they're important to us. It always returns to the self. Well, we're all important to God. And that's why we must forgive and love those who we would normally and easily hate. For what would it profit us as individuals if we would gain all that we want in In Jesus' day, Rome had conquered the whole known world, yet was rotten. Our country, when it stoops to the level of our enemies, when it tortures and kills indiscriminately, loses a part of its soul too, part of its life. Each of us, as individuals, when we hate because we fear, when we condemn what we don't understand, when we hold on to the things in life which in the end will fade and fail, and then not cherish the people and life in the world, we lose a part of ourselves. We are Christians, you and I. We come together and profess who Jesus was according to our creed every Sunday. But our creed doesn't answer today's question from Jesus. Who do you? Who do you? Who do you? Who do you say that Jesus was? Who is Jesus today in your life? And if you don't know or are confused, that's okay. I too, from time to time, am confused. And as we are Christians, though, we profess that we want to follow with this spiritual being, Jesus, where he leads us. And we must ask ourselves as individuals and as a community, where are we going, Jesus? Who are you in this modern world? And if he is the Messiah, what does that mean today? Right now? At this moment, at the moment when I wrote this particular sermon, and as I preach it here today, Jesus for me is the human face of the divine. Jesus is the way that I have a personal relationship with a numinous force of creation. The human way I can feel divine peace. That I can truly know love. That I can experience awe and grace. Jesus is the part of the creation through which I am able to give and experience meaning in life. Through Jesus, my life is given purpose. But that changes over time, don't you know? Based on how wrapped up I am in myself, by what's happening in the world, whether I am in need or I am needed. And it was the same for the disciples. Who they saw Jesus was changed over the course of his ministry, changed over the course of their lives. If, though, we are to follow this Jesus, this Christ, and by that I mean not lose touch with him, then he tells us we must be willing not to put ourselves first. We must be willing to follow the principles that he laid down. The principles laid down by the Prince of Peace. And not to judge, not to condemn, rather to lift up, rather to bring together, to bless rather than to curse. James in his letter this week reminds us of this too. How quickly our petty selves can change the course of our lives like the rudder on a ship. Or how our words can be like a flame to a pile of tinder. This thing called Christianity is not an easy path. It means standing up, not to hate or discriminate, but to love and appreciate. Not to curse or divide, but to bless and sanctify. And we cannot do that when we put ourselves first. It's almost impossible to do that if we lose sight of who this person Jesus was. So this gospel today is important. And this week, every day this week, answer in your hearts the question that he asked his disciples. Who do you say that I am? Not who do other people say that I am. Don't let Jesus be defined by the culture, by me, by your husband or wife, by your kids, by the Pope in Rome. Who is Jesus to you? Who do you say Jesus is? And then act accordingly.